Hello and welcome to Studio 54. Episode 54 of the Week in Strange. How's it going, Thomas?
I was an Ali G sketch where he asked the guy from NASA about, so you got aliens inside Studio 54.
Yeah, pretty much. Yep. But that's basically what we got going on here.
Yeah, I'm good. How are you guys? You weren't killed by a serial killer anyway.
No, I wasn't. I just got back. I am extraordinarily red, like a boiled lobster on Mother's Day. No, I had a great time this weekend with my really good friends Rhett and Christina, and Christina's and my brother, which, by the way, everybody that's going to the conference will get to meet Josh, aka Hesh, Hesh. So just address him as Hesh. Don't worry about it. And Christina's son, who he's a minor, and I don't have permission to say his name, so I won't say his name, but he's a lovely young man. He did amazing. We had an awesome trip this weekend. There was a lot of suffering on my end and Josh's end. We made about a 3-mile vertical ascent up the fucking side of this mountain, and the result was gorgeous, but there was a lot of pain and potentially some emotional damage that was happened, but everybody made it back down and everybody's still friends. So it was a success.
I want to know about the emotional damage. Was it like a really bad TV of the week movie or something like that?
No, it was just insanely grueling, and none of us knew what we were getting into, really. We just knew that there was about 500 yards away from where we had hiked in already 5 miles and where we were camping, there was a trailhead. And so we decided to just, kind of have a leisurely hike day and, check things out. And so we're going to go over to the Billy Jones Trail. And let me tell you that from the get-go, right out of the gate, it was a fucking incline. It was a 3-mile vertical incline the entire way. I think we had, out of the 3 miles, I think we had 320 something feet of descent. So yeah, Josh and I just weren't really quite physically or mentally prepared for that. We made it and it was okay, but just the physical part of it sucked. It was extraordinarily difficult. It would have been a difficult hike for somebody experienced, but the mental part of it, the mental gymnastics that it took to get to the top was, there was a couple points of, there weren't actually any tears, but there were some emotional breakdown moments of, I don't fucking know if I'm going to make it up the side of this fucker. And our friends are, 200, 300, 400 yards ahead of us. And we're just like, we just felt like we were drowning, but we fucking made it.
Good. That's good. Well, you made it. That's important.
Yeah. I posted some pictures of the lake up there. So if anybody gets a chance to look at that, it was absolutely gorgeous. That's where I got sunburnt up there. It's on the face of a granite mountain, and it was white crystalline granite. So the light reflecting off of that was just like a mirror. So the sun coming right down, we were up at high altitude and also reflecting off the sun. I got burnt to a crisp in under an hour. So my face looks really white and the rest of me looks really red. It's an interesting two-tone I have going on here, but anyways, yeah. So thank you to my friends. They put up with a lot of our grumbling and they took it in stride. And they were excellent hiking buddies. This was my first actual, and Josh's first actual backpacking trip. Done loads of camping, but never anything like that. And they're very experienced, and so they had incredible amounts of patience with us. So thank you guys, Rhett and Christina. You fucking rock.
And hello, everyone tuning in live on Facebook today. We appreciate all of you coming in to tune into the live show. Sorry I didn't make the announcement on Facebook earlier. I knew I was missing something. So we appreciate you all showing up anyway. And thank you to all of you tuning in to the playback of the recording on YouTube. And to all of our Patreon supporters, this show would not be possible without you. Both those who subscribe to the Beyond Room 313 Patreon and the Thomas Sheridan Arts. Is that what it is? Thomas Sheridan Arts. Patreon.com/Thomas Sheridan Arts. Is that right?
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. The Thomas's Patreon, the Beyond Room 313
Something like
Patreon.
that. Something like that.
But again, thank you
thanks
to
anyone who found the way there. Thank you.
Absolutely. And then, yep, again, shout out to Rhett and Christina. Rhett is one of our weekly listeners on the Week in Strange. So is Christina. So Rhett and Christina listen to the show all the time. So thank you both for tuning in. And Thomas, I think you had an announcement that you were going to make as well too. Before I hand this over
I wasn't interrupting you. I was thumbing up those people. I do have an announcement. We're going to be taking a break for the winter months, because we all got loads of stuff to do. And we're going to be, the last Week in Strange will be the 19th of September, Monday, and it'll be a special send-off. That's when we're premiering the Atlantis film, which is finished and in the can. And that'll be broadcast instead of the Week in Strange. But we'll probably come on for a half an hour before to talk about little bits and things and Atlantis and stuff like that. Maybe do a week in psychic weather, maybe a year in psychic weather or something. And then we're gone till January. We're not going to come back till probably January, sometime early after Christmas. We all got loads of things to do. And so this is the last Week in Strange will be 9/19. Good magical number. And it'll be very special because it'll be the premiere of the Atlantis film. Myself and Ian MacDonald made, and Jason did the music, and Timothy did some of the narration.
Yep, and we look forward to seeing all of you there at the Mysterious Earth Conference in Preston. We will be there along with Josh Hesh, and looking forward to meeting all of you who show up to the conference. And yeah, it will be good to take a little bit of time off this fall, just like a TV series. The actors and producers and everyone need a little bit of time off. We'll get a little bit of time off here this fall and come back with our batteries recharged and some new content for everyone in January of 2023. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the microphone over to Timony to host the Week in Strange episode number 54.
Studio 54. Okay. Giant voids of nothingness may be flinging the universe apart. Dark energy could be caused by pressure from giant voids of nothingness that may be flinging the universe apart. Gigantic deserts of almost complete nothingness that make up most of the universe may be causing the expansion of the universe to speed up, new research suggests. That means these vast tracts of nothingness could explain dark energy, the mysterious force that seems to be flinging the universe to bits. Welcome to the desert. Zoom all the way out from the solar system and the Milky Way galaxy, and an interesting pattern emerges. The cosmic web, the largest pattern found in nature. At these scales, where entire galaxies appear as little dots of light, astronomers observe long, thin ropes of galaxies called filaments, dense clumps called clusters, and between them, all vast regions of almost total emptiness. These barren regions are the great cosmic voids, the smallest of which are 20 million light years across, while the largest can be more than 160 million light years across. Like the gaps in a spider web, the voids make up the vast majority of the volume of the universe, despite hosting almost none of the matter. Indeed, aside from the cosmic web itself, which stretches from one end of the observable universe to the other, the cosmic voids are the single largest things in the cosmos. Astronomers first detected cosmic voids in the late 1970s, but since then, they've largely been ignored. Astronomers and cosmologists have instead focused on the brightly lit structures of the universe, such as galaxies and clusters. Through those studies, astronomers detected a surprise in the 1990s, and they call it dark energy. Dark energy is the name given to the observed accelerated expansion of the universe. This means that not only is the universe expanding every day, it's expanding ever faster with every passing moment. Astronomers have no clue what's powering this period of accelerated expansion, except which appears to have started about 5 million years ago. Hence the term dark energy. It's a cool name for a massive cosmological conundrum. What do the voids have to do with dark energy? For one thing, the effects of accelerated expansion aren't felt inside of star systems or galaxies. There, the gravitational attraction of matter is more than strong enough to completely overwhelm it. For example, neither our own solar system nor the Milky Way is getting bigger because of dark energy. But because the voids are almost completely empty, they feel the effects of dark energy far more readily. So it makes sense to investigate the nature of this accelerated expansion where its influence is strongest. And a new research paper, led by a team of Iranian theoretical physicists, takes this line of thinking one step further. In their paper, published in July to the preprint database AirXIV and accepted for publication in the journal Monthly Notices of the Royal Astronomical Society, letters, the authors claim that dark energy isn't just found in the voids, but is caused by them. How can these gigantic regions of emptiness cause accelerated expansion? The answer, according to the authors, isn't to look at only the existence of cosmic voids, but also their dynamics. Cosmic voids don't simply exist. Like all other large structures in the universe, they grow from humble beginnings into their present enormous stature. Billions of years ago, all the matter in the universe was spread out pretty evenly. There were no big density differences from place to place. But over time, any place that had a little more matter than average started to attract more matter into it. With more matter, that region had even more attraction, which fueled even more growth. Over billions of years, matter accumulated to form galaxies, groups, and clusters. And as those structures grew, the voids emptied and enlarged. But instead of seeing it as a passive process, we can view the growth of voids as exerting pressure on the structures around them. For example, as voids grow, the walls of galaxies between them steadily thin out and eventually dissolve, allowing voids to merge. In the next few billion years, the voids will end up dissolving the cosmic web, forcing all matter into isolated clumps separated by hundreds of millions of light years of emptiness.
Cosmic Void sounds like an early 80s art school synth band. What's interesting about the story, I can't really add to it. I want to hear what Jason would say, is not the fact that it's expanding. I find that terribly interesting. Nothingness expanding. How about that one? That's a new one. And only 5 million years old, which makes it almost like a baby in terms of cosmology. I wonder how much of the observer effect is playing into this thing.
100%. I would say the observer effect is 100% of what causes that. I was just having a conversation similar to this with Rhett the other day. He sent me some cool stuff over Facebook Messenger, and the idea that us as the observers, us as beingnesses, we don't exist as an energy. And that's one thing that I think there's a big error with the current mainstream scientific paradigm, is they're trying to look at consciousness, awareness, beingness, whatever you want to call it, as a physical thing or as an energy. And they will never find beingness, consciousness, awareness as an energy, as matter, energy, space, or time, because it's none of those things. We as the being, we as the observer don't exist within matter, energy, space, or time. So us as the observer, like Thomas was talking about, is probably what is causing the dark matter quanta. That's, the bits and pieces of the fabric of reality, literally, like the building blocks, the Legos that the universe is composed of. We're the architects of that space. And I would imagine there are other architects out there, not just the ones who exist here in Earth or on Earth as human beings, but there are other beings out there, the gods, whatever you want to call them. There are other entities out there that have physical form or non-physical form that exist and have their own games that they play out there in the universe. We have ours that we play here on planet Earth, and we have an effect on the cosmos as well. But probably there's something that, so something that piqued my interest in that article that Timothy was reading is that the thing about it starting to increase. And as we've been talking about in the last few shows, it seems like there is a change in consciousness, a change in awareness, a change in the psychic field that is causing novelty, as Terence McKenna would call it, to increase. So when he was playing around with this time wave zero thing back in, I want to say, the early 1990s, he talked about, the way the I Ching hexagrams line up with something else that can be mapped to the amount of novelty of creation within humankind throughout time. So this idea that as we go forward into what Thomas calls the next Renaissance, I think that's what we're heading into right now. Is we're going through some period of transition where there is something, I don't know what, but there's something causing awareness to change. And when the aspect of awareness changes, you're forced to look at things from a different point of view. And when you're forced to look at things from a different aspect, you can't help but change the way you do things. So I think that's what's occurring as we go towards the next Renaissance or the next Enlightenment era. There's also going to be changes within the universe, and maybe the universe is expanding, and maybe this is just part of the big cycle of things. We talk a lot about cycles on this show and on Thomas's channel. that it's not a linear progression with a beginning of time and end of time, the way certain religions and philosophies look at things, as if there's a start point and an end point, and there's a beginning times, there's once, nothingness, and then there's creation and there's end. That's kind of a one-dimensional, two-dimensional way of looking at life, but looking at life with more than just those start end points, there's just grand cycles of events occurring. So I would imagine we're probably heading into, or we have departed into, a new aeon, a new era that maybe started sometime around 2020. Maybe it goes all the way back to 2012. I mean, I can certainly look back and say that, starting from January 2013, my life was incredibly different. And maybe we just started to like fully get into the news cycle proper by 2020 with, an event that kind of just forced our asses off the couch, so to speak, with what, yeah. Go ahead.
2008 was definitely the year that I noticed that things were different for me. And over the years, people have said something happened in their lives in 2008, major things. I think we're both right. I think 2001 was almost like the pulled the trigger. 2008 was when the hammer struck the bullet, and 2012 to 15 is when the bullet flew out of the barrel. And so I think we can't. It wasn't just one thing. It was a sequence of events that had to happen. But I do think the catalyst was probably, I can't think of one before 9/11, but maybe there is. But I definitely, 2008 was a big one. That was a major one. So many people hit the touchstone on that one, consciously in their personal lives and everything. The crossover 2008 to 2009.
Yep. I like that analogy. Pulling the trigger, the hammer hitting the firing pin and hitting the primer, and then the projectile exiting the barrel. I like that. That's a really great analogy for this. Yeah, for me, 2008 into 2009 was a very transformative period of time for me. I enlisted in the Marine Corps in September of 2008, and then went to boot camp in January of 2009. So that was a departure onto a new, Joseph Campbell hero's journey thing for me. And then, coming into completion with that cycle at the end of 2012 into 2013, doing some other things. So yeah, my personal evolutionary cycle lines up with those. And then 2016, I would say the world that we used to live in was gone by 2017. 2016, yeah, that was like the death throes of the old era kind of occurred between 2013 to 2016. And then 17, 18, 19, and then 20, I would say, is when the chicken emerged from the egg, so to speak, or started to emerge from the egg.
Looking back at 2008 and 2009 crossover, me personally, I now understand it quite well. It was when I stopped being afraid of bottling up things inside me that I had strong opinions about, like since 2001.
Yeah, Timothy had to go answer the door real quick, but yeah, there's just I would say it's almost like 2001 was crossing the event horizon before things started to change. And then by the time we get to 2020, it's like a new paradigm. We've gone over the event horizon. We've gone into the black hole or gone into the abyss.
It was like consciousness took a long time to change, but the actual thing that caused the trigger was 9/11. I absolutely believe that. But it's it didn't change then. It was just the sequences were set in motion.
Right. Yeah, 9/11, 2001. Yeah, and it's just like I've said before, or maybe I've not said it on this show. Maybe I've just said this to friends and family before, that I think that these moves that are played by the players that play the game here, players that play the pieces and stuff like that, these chess moves take probably 3 generations to manifest. So it's like people expect things to unfold the way they do in like a Marvel Cinematic Universe kind of way. And it's like, no, we're not in a movie. If there were to be a movie made about it, it'd be a very long scale movie, kind of like that movie. It doesn't matter. But it would take a very long time for these moves to put in place. So between 2001 and 2020, that's 19 years, but still, that's not that much time when you look at the grand scale of time scale within our universe, and, but
I have this experiment I wanted to do. I'm even looking back at photographs that were taken before 2001, and the world looked completely different. Everything looked different. So I'm thinking of one of the things I was thinking of doing was getting my hand on an old camera and old film, and taken photographs of the world today and see if the color tones and the pictures and look the same as what they did prior to 2001.
Yeah, I mean, that goes along with the yellow sun that we all remember growing up with a yellow sun, and we don't have a yellow sun anymore. It's gone white, and now it's almost blue. It's like an electric blue kind of. And I mean, whether that's because the sun is passing through different material out there in interstellar space, and it's causing it to get more excited and go at a higher rate of burn or whatever it is. It's just the sun is different.
We fucked up our ozone with Aquanet.
Yeah, no, it's Timothy was saying we fucked up the ozone with Aquanet. Obviously, it was the Aquanet.
I loved every fucking minute.
Yeah. Fuck the ozone. So yeah, something did change, and I think something is changing, and there's been a catalyst that has caused an effect. And in the end, yeah, all the physical stuff has changed. Time and space have changed. Energy has changed. But those things are obviously at effect to us as the cause. We, as the beings here in this universe, are the ones that truly cause effect. Even though the Abrahamic religions and a lot of other religions like to say that we as human beings are subject to the universe, no, I'll go out there and say that no, the universe is subject to us. You know, all of us.
I can add a little flavor to that mix. I recall reading an article back in the 90s that was written by an American archaeologist who had decoded the Inca star map. The Inca star map had been a very confusing thing for people because they had a different, you know, like their constellations were vastly different than, say, like the European or Egyptian or Babylonian constellations, and didn't seem to make any kind of sense. And what he discovered eventually was that what they used for the constellation was the black areas inside the Milky Way, the dark areas in Silver. And in the article, just casually out of nowhere, he mentions that those black areas don't seem to be as dark as they used to be, almost as if by observing them, they were filled in with stars.
That's right. And just going back to the observer effect, it's, and I will always advocate for us as human beings, us as spiritual beings, not even as human beings, but us as beingnesses, have more power than the religions and a lot of philosophies will say. You know, I don't subscribe necessarily to fatalistic approaches to things that we have our fate or our destiny set in stone by some other determinism. That's why astrology, some people do, and that's fine. But me personally, I don't subscribe to the idea. That's true. Timothy's saying that's when you become the magician. Very good point. But that's why for me, astrology only goes to a certain extent for me, because it's like there is still free will and self-determinism within the universe. And we you know, our physical body, our mind, our personality can be at effect to an external force. But then again, we as a beingness within the body are still an external effect to the body. We as a beingness aren't a product of the body. No matter how many of the, going back to our article, no matter how many of the scientists out there, the scientism types, will like to say that beingness, awareness, consciousness is a product of the body or is a product of the physical universe. No, the physical universe, the body, all that are a product of awareness, of consciousness, of beingness. So again, that's what I'm saying. Like astrology, it has its place in predicting things with personality, and has its place with predicting things with persona, personality, with stuff within the body. But you still are a individual being that has lived through many incarnations and has had many bodies, many minds, many personalities, and you will still have your own unique personality that's different than you're in.
You could kind of say that, you know, if you want to go on the astrology or the fate map or whatever, you know, that's sort of like a built-in stock map. Like if you're gonna play a video game, and the only reason I know anything about this is my kid plays video games and talks about maps all the time. So like if you can't get to the point where you can create your own map, the universe sort of gives you one, you know, to follow along with and make sense of and navigate through it until you get to the point where you can create your own map.
Yeah, the way I feel about astrology is that it's giving you not determinism, but scenarios, and it's up to you to deal with those scenarios. It's not a case that you're fated to them. They may possibly, they're coming down the road for whatever reason, and it's giving you an edge on how to adapt with them. But I don't think the determinism, I don't think any real astrologer would actually say you're fated to this. They would say that like this is like, it's almost like if you're an NPC, astrology, all of it will come true for you. But if you're someone who is creative and adaptive, you will navigate this map, as Timony said, in your own, and like then you become like you become like a god at the end of it.
Yeah, and I'll still just say that I don't think that necessarily it will always work out that whatever is in the stars, so to speak, is something that will necessarily make it into the trajectory of someone's life. I think okay, yeah, but anyway, yeah, I think we're all saying the same thing from a different angle. That it's a template there that can be followed, but you as the observer, and the more high level of awareness, or the greater the awareness of you, the greater your awareness as a being is, the more that stuff doesn't have an effect on you, is what I'll say. The more of an architect of your own life you are, the less you are a subject of the universe around you. And yes, people will I know I'll probably get a lot of flack for this, but people can, allegedly cause effect in your life by, knowing your birth date, knowing, where you were born and all that. But I'll still say, if you are your own being and have shaped and molded your own destiny, that stuff doesn't have as much of an effect on you. We still are the, like Timothy was saying, a magician creating your own reality. Not everyone. I'm not talking about everyone. I'm talking about people like us. And, the higher level of awareness that you have as a being, the more you're going to be able to create your own universe. I'm not talking about your average person who isn't into these topics. I'm talking about people like us who are into these topics. Somebody who's never looked into consciousness, never looked into spirituality. They're going to be more subject to influences of the universe, and be less in tune with their dharma or with their true will or with their self-determinism and free will, is what I'm saying. So the higher up in awareness and ability you go, the more you are following your true will, so to speak, in Crowleyan terms, the more you are an architect of your own destiny.
Yeah,
and the destiny of the universe.
If you look at Eastern astrology, like Vedic astrology and Chinese astrology, it's quite different in Western astrology in that it's like it's used as advantages. There's certain changes coming that you can use to your advantage. I notice in Western astrology, you can definitely see the Abrahamic influences come in there. It's almost like your star sign is your original sin and you're shackled to it. And I find that's the thing I'm not particularly crazy about Western astrology, is this whole thing, you have this star sign and that's what you are. And that's in Eastern astrology, it's not like that at all. It's almost the world will affect you in a certain way. Here's how you can get out of it, or here's how you can deal with it.
Yeah, I like that approach more. And I do agree with you that it's the thing, it's almost like original sin built in there. There's just that, it's like no matter what the philosophy that comes up, it kind of always ends up getting tainted or contaminated or infected with the mind virus.
And remember, Western astrology is extremely Abrahamic. Yeah. And they don't want to admit that, but I mean, it was basically developed by rabbis living in Bohemia in the Renaissance era or prior to that. So it's I mean, unfortunately, there's no pagan astrology that we really know of for us in the West. But I find that interesting that people don't really want to acknowledge that Western astrology is very, very Abrahamic and Kabbalistic in its origins.
Yeah, and there's still a tremendous amount of value in there, and it's just interesting to look at that. No matter what the spiritual philosophy is, in the end there are people that will always infiltrate it and infect it with the mental spiritual virus that seems to have existed throughout the universe through all time. So it's like no matter if it's like neo-paganism or whatever it is, it always ends up getting, that spiritual mental virus comes along and takes it over, and it all starts to dwindle down into original sin or some version of that where, we have to, there's something wrong with us and we have to fix ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the fundamental energies behind all those things are correct. The naming conventions are culturally enforced, or they're culturally derived, or they're religiously or theologically derived. But it's like when someone uses the Kabbalah and then say someone works with the runes, although they're from complete or works with the I Ching, although they're from completely different cultures, they're still connected to the same underlying energy force. It's just a language that's used to describe it.
Yeah, we could call it the observer effect. However you choose to observe it.
Have I gone offline?
Can still hear you. You're frozen though. Say stuff. Oh, there you go. Came back out of cryo sleep. Nope, now he's gone again. Okay. Can you guys let us know in the comments if you can hear us or if you can hear Thomas?
We either lost us or lost Thomas. Okay, if everybody over in the Facebook chat can let us know if you can hear us or hear Thomas. That's weird. What's going on? Yes, Tom. Oh, us. Yes, Thomas. No. Yep. No, Thomas, though. Okay. Well, we'll wait here for a couple minutes until Thomas comes back online. But yeah, so as Timothy was saying, the observer effect. And I think that's, really important to take into consideration when we're looking at these systems. I mean, yeah, they are incredibly valuable and we can get a lot out of them. But like I was saying, the further you go into finding your own true will and living by that true will, it's like the more you're able to shape your own destiny. And that's something that seems like a very foreign concept to a lot of people, probably, whom they've always relied on something outside of themselves to shape their destiny for them, whether it's religion or they're always looking to the tarot cards or they're always looking to astrology to tell them what to do next. It's kind of like once you've made it past that, if we're looking at it as with an initiatory order, there's the outer order, and then there's the upper two orders of that. It's like as you cross over into the innermost circle of things where you are your own architect of life. It's kind of like once you've made it to a certain level of awareness as a being, you no longer have to necessarily follow along with those prescribed ideas. And Thomas is back.
I had to restart my internet, sorry.
Oh, okay. We observed the internet too much.
Yeah, the gremlins are out tonight.
Okay. Warning. Centuries-old hunger stones emerge from dry riverbeds in drought-stricken Europe. Water levels have dropped in major rivers across Europe as the region suffers under historic drought. In those dry riverbeds, centuries-old warning messages have emerged. The horrifying boulders are known as hunger stones. A local German reporter, Olaf Cohen, said in an August 11th tweet. One of these stones is embedded in the Elbe River, which runs from the mountains of Chechnya, how do I say that? Yeah, through Germany to the North Sea. The stone, dating back to a drought in 1616, is once again visible in the dry riverbed. The warning reads, "If you see me, weep." Hunger stones like this one were used as hydrological landmarks across Central Europe. NPR reported when the stones last surfaced during a 2018 drought. These stones are chiseled with the years of hardship and the initials of authors lost to history. The basic inscriptions warn of the consequences of drought. It expressed that drought had brought a bad harvest, lack of food, high prices, and hunger for poor people. Europe's current drought is certainly historic. Scientists at the European Drought Observatory said that the drought is on track to be the worst in 500 years. The Mesta Bridge in Villarta de los Montes in Spain, a nice example of Gothic civil engineering. Since 1956, it's been covered by the waters of the Sihara Reservoir, but the drought has brought it back to light. According to the Drought Observatory, 47% of Europe is in drought warning conditions, meaning the soil has a moisture deficit. Another 17% is on alert, meaning the vegetation in the area is being affected by dry conditions. Major rivers in Germany, Italy, and England, the Rhine, the Po, and the Thames, respectively, are drying out. Rivers are too dry, too low, and too warm, which has consequences on wildlife, the economy, and people. The remains of the Aquus Coriandus Roman castrum in Galatia, which is normally covered by the waters of the Lima River and the Concha Reservoir. It dates back to the 3rd century and was on the Via Nova. Water levels in the Rhine River are about half of their usual depth for this time of the year, with some sections having even lower water levels. This has made shipping on the river 5 times more expensive because cargo ships must carry less weight to make sure that they do not run aground. In Italy, the prime minister said that the country is experiencing the most serious water crisis of the last 70 years. This 450-kilo World War II era bomb was discovered in Italy's dried up Po River. According to the General Directorate of Water Management, the water level in Lake Valence, a popular tourist lake near Budapest, is at its lowest level ever recorded. The drought comes after months of high temperatures and little rainfall. Human-induced climate change has also contributed to the intensity, frequency, and duration of heat events and amplified droughts. Outside of Las Vegas, is it Lake Mead? Lake Mead's been drying up too, and they're finding all kinds of bodies tossed that have been tossed in the lake. So don't fuck around in Vegas, man.
This is actually kind of more creepier than that story even said. You mentioned the Thames there in England. What's been reported is, I've heard, is that springs aren't bringing water up. So the initial spring that feeds the rivers are actually missing. What the hell is that all about? There's something really weird with nature going on right now. The psychic weather report will be about that. There's something, this is why I think I've been making a big deal about auguries and stuff lately. There's definitely something not right with nature. And it's not to do with like just sunshine and drought. You know, those rivers are still fed by runoff water that falls along their course. But when the springs don't actually bring water up at the source, we're in a very strange place. And that's definitely happened at the Thames. The upper reaches of the Thames, the spring is not worked. Now, these rivers are often, like the ones you mentioned, the Thames, the Po, and the Danube, are very sacred, mystical rivers. They're named after gods and goddesses, and they've actually played a huge part in the history of Western esotericism. And for these rivers, those 3 rivers in particular, to dry up, I think that's a very potent warning or something. When they wrote on that stone, if you see this, weep, I don't think they're necessarily meaning about just drought. I think they're actually talking about like literally changes in the world and people, and it's beyond just like there's less water, guys. It's more like this is deeper. We know our consciousness is very connected to deep water. That it's a reflection of us as a culture. And shallow, when they call somebody shallow, it literally means that they're like shallow water. There's nothing deep within them. We're living in a very shallow age, in a very shallow world. We've got shallow science, shallow art, shallow culture, shallow people, shallow everything. And maybe the gods and the goddesses of it's always a female anyway. The goddesses of the Thames, Po, and Danube have actually said, neglected us for a while. And so I think this is something, they'll throw the climate change things in. And yes, there is climate change going on, but it's nothing to do with what they're saying. And I really do think that we're entering into, this is all part of this, what Jason was saying, this new reality. And, you will find that things have to completely rebuild themselves and reconstruct themselves from the bottom up, and very literally from the source up.
I would tend to think that the reason why the aquifers and springs that are feeding these rivers are drying up and no longer pumping water, there's going to be something somewhere else where ancient aquifers and ancient springs are just going to be geysering. And this is just part, again, like I said before, about cycles. I would imagine that as one area turns into a desert, another desert turns into an oasis. And this could have something to do, again, I always go back to the idea of the poles changing. That's something that's just been in the back of my mind for the last decade or so, that the poles do move. And I wonder if we're facing something like that now, where literally the poles of the earth could be shifting, right beneath the surface of right beneath our feet, so to speak. And, we're seeing the small effects of it starting to manifest. And then one day it'll just be like that, and something will be totally different. We'll wake up here in the Pacific Northwest at the equator or something, the new equator, or you guys there in Ireland and the British Isles will be at the equator or something like that. But I think that might be what's going on, is there is a climate change that has nothing to do with human induced climate change, but that, the climate changes in this grand cycle of things, that whether it's 12,000 years, 24,500 years, whatever it is, there is a big cycle like that. And these stones, I would imagine they are everywhere, and there might be some under ice in Antarctica, or there might be, under glaciers here in the Pacific Northwest, that, those things thaw out, and we might find traces of our previous civilizations that are just buried under ice or buried under sand, out there in the Sahara. Maybe the Sahara will become tropical again, or it'll become something again. I would imagine that this is just how life goes. And we are comfortable in the idea of the scientific paradigm saying that our Earth has always looked, for the most part, the way that it is. But I think this fucker changes quite a bit. I think it changes dramatically. I think there are things that change over time. But if you look at, some of the dramatic topology around the world, whether it's the Grand Canyon or certain cliffs, it's like those things look like they might have been created in an instant. There are certain things that look like they could have happened very quickly, and just one day, there's even ground, and the next day, there's a giant cliff there where the plates just separated like that. And then there are other things that take a long time to do. But I think that, we're starting to see the effects of that. And, we were just talking about the idea of consciousness changing, awareness changing, and all these things are they're interdependent on each other. Consciousness will change as physical reality changes. Physical reality will change as consciousness changes. And I'm not worried about it. I'm sure there's going to be things to be concerned about, but we're not here, being doom mongers or fear mongers. Yeah, things are going to suck, but life always sucks. There's always something to contend with. I don't like media that people put out there where they're always looking for a kind of a doom and gloom aspect on it. I think there's enough doom and gloom in life no matter where you look, and there's enough beauty in life no matter where you look too. And this is just the kind of stuff that we're going to contend with. There's going to be changes in reality, and maybe some of our creature comforts.
We should even enjoy it. We should
absolutely enjoy it.
Maybe not enjoy, but marvel would be the word. Marvel at it.
No, I like what you said. Enjoy, absolutely enjoy it. It's like enjoying a good thunderstorm, or there's going to be tragedy, and I can see the comments already. Of course, there's going to be tragedy. Of course, there's going to be lives lost, but the whole experience is something. There's going to be art that comes out of it. There's going to be philosophy that comes out of it. There are going to be wonderful things that come out of these changes. We don't need to sit back and worry about it. Yeah, there are things to be concerned about, but as I said, there are always things to be concerned about, and it's something to enjoy. So I think this whole article, the hunger stones and all of that, I agree, Thomas. It's not just the weep because of no food. It's weep because bad times are ahead, and those bad times that are ahead might be, those areas no longer having the climate that they once had, not because of man-made climate change, but just because this is shifting into a new season. And maybe there are other places on the planet that are suddenly very, maybe parts of Siberia will suddenly be temperate. Maybe things like that will occur. Maybe there are deserts that will become rehydrated, and maybe there are frozen areas that thaw out and dehydrate. Yeah.
If you look at the old maps, there's lands and countries in the sea that are not there anymore. Like the Pirisi map, that shows like a huge, not just a small island, but a very large landmass to the south of Britain and Ireland. And yet everything else on the map is completely accurate. So were they lying about that? So, maybe Atlantis will come to the surface again. Maybe, and I always think you'll see the film, but the thing of High Brazil, it appeared and vanished every so often. Maybe this is maybe it'll come out of the sea in the next few decades or something. Maybe other things like that will happen. The landforms will go up and down. The plate tectonics have a seesaw effect. I'm kind of open to anything at this point. And I think like the interesting things like, okay, the mud flood thing is bollocks in terms of what the truthers think it's all about. They think like, the Illuminati flooded the world with mud or some shit like that. But on terms of like the fact that they're even interested in something like that, maybe a bubbling up from the subconscious of earth changes that they as a kind of a collective Renfield are actually tapping into. And the same with, like, say, my interest. I'd never been interested really in Atlantis until maybe a year and a half ago, and suddenly became very interested in it. And so maybe the zeitgeist is telling us through all these things that, like, yeah, the air changes are coming, and this is part of the whole. Another thing too is, like, all over the world, have you seen this? There are mountains, outcroppings, and glacial erratics that look like they were once perfectly formed sculptures of human beings and animals. And they're excellent, and like the anatomical proportions are far too perfect for them. They've had to be obviously been eroded, are far too perfect for that to have been accidental. Now, you'd say with one or two of them, like they say one or two statues, rock croppings around the world look like they were once giant statues of people or an animal. But there's absolutely, when you start looking at this, there's thousands of them all over the world that look like they were once giant statues that were hit with a sudden cataclysm, like a giant wave or something. So I'm really like getting down with all this stuff now and starting to, well, obviously I've always known the humanity was way over than we thought. But I often think that this catastrophism happens much more frequently than we've been told.
100%. I think it happens quite frequently, and I want to say too that we should probably keep an eye on our favorite part of the planet over there on the globe. When you rotate it and you've got that whole Pacific area, I would imagine maybe whether it's Lemuria or whatever you want to call it, there's going to be pushing things up from the bottom of the Pacific over where Cthulhu is dead and dreaming. But things over there, I want to say, as we watch certain areas dry up, let's keep an eye on the Pacific, see if there's new Pacific islands, if there's new artifacts that wash up in Hawaii or in New Zealand or in Australia, Tasmania.
Easter Island,
thank you. French Polynesia, that whole area. Maybe there'll be more French Polynesian islands that just suddenly just whoop. And I imagine that we've probably got some followers out there who own boats and airplanes and who goes on trips out there. So if any of you guys on your journeys out to sea, or as you're flying around out there, see anything interesting, please send it over to us at br313@gmx.com. That's br313@gmx.com. If you find anything interesting like that, always please send it our way. If it's something firsthand that you've experienced, if you own a boat or if you own an airplane and you're in that part of the planet, we'd love to see if anything new pops up out of there. Because I would imagine, just like you're saying with Atlantis, Thomas, there'll be parts of the planet that sink and parts of it that rise up, and that's just a cycle. That's just how things go. It's nothing.
Yeah, in the new book by myself and Neil MacDonald, Atlantis, an Empire Lost and Found, we have actually included illustrations from the British Library of land masses that don't exist anymore, and they're actually drawn up like proper cartographers and showing the Sahara Desert underwater. So I mean, I think this stuff has been a lot more recent than they're telling us.
Right. And that's what I like about a lot of this alternative history. I know you're talking about the mud flood thing, and a lot of that has been infiltrated by the CIA or by nonsense speakers, but there is something to a lot of it. I found a couple of people who do research into, there's the Tartaria thing, but then there's people that go, no, that's a bunch of bullshit. And there's people who just call it the old world. And there's old world stuff that is just remains of previous civilizations. There's a lot of it that's been found over in the down in the Bay Area around San Francisco. And Thomas, I mentioned this on the last show. There's kind of Cyclopean style brick walls and things from a previous era that are just throughout Napa.
Anton LaVey grew up there, and he actually believed in this stuff and said he even saw when he was young Lovecraftian type water creatures in the sewers underneath San Francisco.
Right. And so there's something to it. There's something to this alternative history. And just like with everything, it gets infiltrated by people who put a lot of bullshit into it. But there's stuff to research out there. There's enough people out there who aren't part of the flat Earth, mud flood, CIA, no trees, no birds group. But there's some real stuff out there, which I'm happy to see. I'm happy to see that more and more people are looking into this alternative history scene. And it's something that fascinates me, especially the stuff here on the West Coast. I'm a West Coast guy. I've lived here on the West Coast of the U.S. my whole life. So it's cool to see some of this stuff here in my neck of the woods. Cool.
I had to go grab a sweater because of this sunburn. I can't figure out if I'm hot or if I'm cold. Okay.
Make sure you drink plenty of water, though. That's very important when you get sun.
Oh, yeah. I've been drinking water nonstop. It's good stuff. Okay. You can take someone's DNA and create a biological weapon against that person. U.S. Congressman Jason Crow has stated that there is a biological weapon that uses DNA to kill people. He issued a similar warning during the security forum in Aspen, Colorado. Crow warned the Americans not to be so careless, as their DNA samples could fall into the hands of private companies due to the emergence of a new type of weapon. You can take someone's DNA, grab their medical profile, and then you can target them with a bioweapon that will kill that person or take them off the battlefield or render them inoperable. The congressman said he was concerned about the development of such weapons because DNA testing services are growing in popularity, where people willingly share their genetic maps with the private companies to gain insight into their genealogy and their health. You can't discuss this without considering privacy and commercial data protection, because privacy expectations have gotten worse over the last 20 years. Young people actually know very little about privacy, surveys and data show. People just quickly spit in a cup, send it to 23andMe, and get some really interesting data about their genetic backgrounds. 23andMe is an American private biotechnology company that provides private clients with information about their predisposition to diseases based on the analysis of the provided biomaterial. By June 2015, they are known to have performed DNA analysis on more than 1 million people. And guess what's next? And then their DNA is now owned by this private company, and it can be sold with very little intellectual property or privacy protection. And we don't have the legal and regulatory regimens to deal with that. We need to have an open and public discussion about what the protection of medical information, DNA information, and your data looks like, because this data will actually be obtained and collected by our adversaries to develop these systems. Crow is a former military man who served in Iraq and Afghanistan, so he knows more than enough about various types of weapons. That is why his statement sounds so alarming. And if he talks about the creation of a DNA weapon, then most likely such a weapon has already been created and used a long time ago. In this regard, we can recall a series of strange oncologies among the heads of different countries, which was recorded several years ago. They were mostly leaders of Latin American countries. Presidents fell ill with cancer in a short time and died or were treated for a very long time. In 2018, Vietnamese president died of cancer. His cancer was diagnosed suddenly and killed him in a year, despite the fact that he traveled to Japan 6 times for treatment, where there is a high level of medicine, including in terms of oncology. Doctors eventually stated that the form of cancer found in him is so rare that there is not even any scientific statistics on it. Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez died of cancer in 2013, and the country's scientists soon discovered strange chemical elements in his tumor samples, which caused the oncology. Immediately, there were rumors that Chavez was infected with cancer by the U.S. Special Services. In 2012, Argentine president, a friend of Chavez, died of bowel cancer. In 2013, Cristina Fernandez, the president's widow who replaced him in the post, was diagnosed with thyroid carcinoma. Brazilian President Lula da Silva was diagnosed with throat cancer at the age of 66, and his successor, who succeeded him in 2011, was diagnosed with breast cancer 2 years after her inauguration. In 2013, Paraguayan President Fernando Lugo was diagnosed with lymphoma. Bolivian President Evo Morales was diagnosed with nasal cancer, and Colombian President Juan Manuel was diagnosed with prostate cancer. By the way, Fidel Castro also died of cancer, having survived hundreds of traditional assassination attempts organized by the CIA. As for 23andMe, it has repeatedly stated in the past that it does not sell customers' personal information. However, there are many such private companies in the US and similar anxious politicians like Crow as well. US Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa, a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, agreed with Crow at the same forum in Aspen and said US rivals could use bioweapons with DNA to massively destroy food supplies. Ernst warned that biological weapons could be used specifically to kill specific animals on which citizens, troops, or cities depend, leading to food shortages and insecurity and weakening people.
Yeah, I was watching a documentary. I'll tell you, some years ago, I saw a TV report or something with Louis Farrakhan, Nation of Islam, and he said that the US government had developed a bomb that could only kill black people. And I remember I was laughing at the time, and I thought that's just ridiculous. And then it turned out, yeah, indeed, the South Africans had actually started developing it, and the technology had basically ended up in the US. They were developing bioethnic weapons targeting DNA. Now, what I read about this was that it never actually worked, that they could never actually make it work, but there was a program there to do this, to actually find like an ethnic weapon that would kill certain ethnic groups and leave the others unharmed by it. And then again, there was a conference here recently, only last week, with Robert Malone and a few other American scientists, and they said the same thing, that stuff about these ethnic weapons and these bioweapons is all true. These DNA weapons, they're not covered under, you have laws where certain weapons are forbidden. They're not, that's a myth. They said that you think that these bioweapons are forbidden. They're not. They're forbidden to use them, but they're not forbidden to actually research them. But if the shit hit the fan, they would definitely be used. So I've absolutely no doubt that this shit is going on. It's extremely dark, extremely evil. And it's also interesting that all of South American things, because all I can think about then is Mengele and Nazi scientists who escaped the Third Reich.
I've got one thing to say about this. This all sounds exactly like what happened at the end of 19 and the early 2020. And yeah, all of that is outlawed, but what happens when it exits out the door of one of these laboratories that they are working on this, then it's an accident. And that's hard to prove that it's, I mean, there's plenty of evidence out there that it is a bioweapon. People have looked at the artifacts that CRISPR leaves behind when there's gene editing things, and people have looked at it and seen the artifacts that CRISPR has left behind in it when it's looked at under a scanning electron microscope. So that's what I'll just say is I'm pretty sure that we've already seen this put into an effect with the way that it has gone out there and has just targeted only certain groups of people. And it seems like the more that they go along with the needlecraft with it, the more that it seems to be targeting specific groups of people in specific ways. And I would imagine that the needlecraft is absolutely part of this as a weapon. But that's all I really want to say about that. I don't want to get too deep into it. I don't want to trip off the algorithms too bad on Facebook or YouTube. That's pretty much what I have to say about that, is that I think this already is in effect, especially with the fact that they would be able to do live testing to see how effective it is with all of the tests that they're doing. If everybody's watching my gesture here with those tests that they did, you would be able to keep track of what works and what doesn't work. So they collected you would imagine a tremendous amount of DNA was collected through those tests, these ones. And
that test made no sense to me from the start.
Right.
No sense. There's 1,000,001 ways to test for a virus. Go deep into the brain. Come on, there was something that to me was one of the biggest, earliest red flags, was that test.
Especially because you could do that one or just the one that goes around in the nostril. It's like one or the other. But
let's shove something into your brain.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's something really, really strange about that. And I'm sure they collected a tremendous amount of DNA through that. And like they're saying, 23andMe and these Ancestry.com don't sell people's data. Well, that's just a sentence. You can get around things by rewording a sentence. They might not sell the data.
It's like no animals were hurt in this movie, but they were killed.
Right. Or just, the data might not have been sold by 23andMe, but whoever is the parent company that owns 23andMe, that owns the servers, didn't sell the data. They have the data, and that company that owns 23andMe might be connected with one of the biotech. So that data was already owned by some of the big biotech people. So it was never sold. It was already owned by big biotech. So anyway, I think that's what went on. And yeah, everything was put into place for 23andMe, and Ancestry came about, around 2010 timeframe, 2008, 2010. Excuse me. People started doing those things. And yeah, there's a tremendous amount of DNA collected with that, but not nearly as much as what was collected with the one that the lobotomy.
Totally and completely agree. And that was all about consent, and they could get very specific data in particular regions, particular age groups, all kinds, every demographic under the sun, very tight hard data. And that was never about searching for a virus. That was about there was either it was no good, whatever it was. It was. And again, we're back to the whole earth changes things. Remember, folks, this evil is a reflection of them losing control. Always remember that. Always remember that the more evil they're getting, it's like an animal lashing, a wild animal lashing out as it's in its death throes. So don't see this as the end of the world. See this as the end of them.
Yeah, it's a transitional phase from one form to another form of reality. And they could have been in lifetime keeping track of what was working with that thing and the needle crafts that they used to cause and effect with it to try to wipe that thing out. They could be testing to see, okay, what works, what doesn't work. And they, people were so willingly doing this. Every airport, every train station, every concert venue, everything people were required to do it weekly for work. It was just imagine the amount of DNA that was collected. So there's databases, and those databases are probably all owned by the big biotech industries. The data goes from LabCorp to whatever, and then it's all housed.
And it could have been an instant download. We don't know if there's some kind of chip inside those tests. As soon as it collected it inside the nose, it uses the Wi-Fi system to upload it to the cloud somewhere.
Right. And with cloud stuff, yeah, it can be backed up on servers not within the United States or not within the EU, maybe over in the CCP, who knows. But yeah, that's what this story immediately made me think of, was that, yeah, this is already being done and has been done. And
they even got people to do the test themselves at home. Yep. It's not their fault. There are people who work in things like the medical field were actually coerced into having to test themselves once a week.
Mm-hmm. So it's just real creepy. But at the same time, I think that, to quote Ian Malcolm again, life finds a way. And these bioweapons that are targeted towards DNA and life and everything is incredibly robust. And as soon as you try to mess with natural law will just pivot a little bit. And, the entire human genome or the individual genome will just say, nope, this doesn't work, and just will adapt incredibly quickly. And I think that they had intended on that whole thing that started in 2020. I think they intended it to go really well, and it did not go as planned. I think that, like, as we talked,
because DNA and consciousness are the same. They can't understand them. DNA is more of a mystical, is far more esoteric and mystical than just like strands of proteins and stuff.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's like we're saying a few weeks ago. It's like that battle has been completed, and I think they intended it for it to go a lot better for them than it did, and it totally did not cause the effect they were intending. So I'm not too concerned about it. There are always things to be concerned about, as I said, but it's just interesting to sit back and watch it as they try to do these things.
Yeah, we've got a front row. We've got a front row seat to this show,
right?
Don't just watch it. Don't be in terror of it.
That's right.
Alrighty. It is psychic weather time. Thomas, are you ready?
I am indeed.
So am I.
Is it bad? Is it great? Are you happy? Are you irate? The week in psychic weather.
Hi, the week in psychic weather this week is, wow, we're still on the auguries thing. And, you may say, well, what has this got to do with the psychic state of human beings? Well, because we're wired into the natural world, and the natural world is wired into us. And things that happen within the natural world are direct reflections of what's going on deep in our subconscious. You hear me talking about how, disturbances in the deep water often reflect changes within the human's condition that's subject to them. This week, I pointed this out the other day, and other people have noticed that there's something profoundly incorrect with how plants are growing. There's something wrong. Already in the middle of summer, trees have started to lose their leaves and fall off. Berries, rowan berries, which are usually not ripened until about 2 or 3 months from now, are already fully ripened. There's people who are serious hardcore gardeners tell me that even in controlled environments like polytunnels and with seeds and water, that things, they could not even get seeds to germinate. There are some plants that are okay, but there's lots of losses of everything else. the seasons are all wrong, or something's all wrong. But in particular, notice that the trees, everything is not happening correctly. I don't know where it's happening where you are, but here the leaves are already falling off the trees months before they should happen. And also fruits are not appearing. And also plants are not appearing. My roses didn't even make buds this year. And that's just so weird, because the previous 2 years, there was a tremendous growth in everything. And also the apple trees didn't produce apples. And I've noticed that the chestnut trees don't have the flowers, and they're already starting to go brown. They're not going to produce chestnuts this year. So something is really happening with the growth cycles. And I think people that I know who I would consider spiritually attuned have noticed this. They may be sitting in their backyard and looked at the park across the street and said, why are the leaves already falling off the trees early on? And I think those of us who are noticing these things are seeing, we're the frontline observers of what's coming down. And again, the week in psychic weather this week is observe nature, and not just the animals, but especially observe the plants and the flora. And that's the week in psychic weather.
Is it bad? Is it great? Are you happy? Are you irate? The week in psychic weather.
Yeah, I've noticed the same thing over here in the Pacific Northwest, Thomas. Not that fall is arriving early, but Cliff High, and I know there's a lot of Cliff High watchers on our channel here too, has talked about the increase in what he called biomass. In his explanation, like just weeds, growth, everything, that there's just this increase of growth, especially here in the Pacific Northwest. And I'll paraphrase what he said. I'm probably going to do a terrible job at it. You guys can correct me in the comments, but he's basically saying as we go hurtling through space, and as we go through the sun and all the planets are going through a different source of energy, basically, that there's going to be different energy coming through the sun, coming back onto Earth, causing things to grow like crazy right now. So like here, the weeds have been growing like crazy. The grass is growing like crazy. But I would imagine, again, this is just part of a cycle of things. And perhaps, fall showing up early for you guys there in the British Isles, Ireland, Scotland, might be because you guys are having a total shift in the way that seasons are going to be, and the amount of water available, and like we were talking about earlier with the pole flip and everything, that perhaps this is a part of the effect of the poles changing, or of just the Earth changing in general. It's not man-made climate change, but it is climate and topography and everything changing, because this is just how things go. And we're overdue for an ice age already, right? I want to say, I think we're coming up pretty soon to going into a new ice age with the next couple solar minimums, I want to say. Is that correct? Is that something that you're attuned to, Thomas?
I've been hearing about the ice age coming since I was a little kid.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I'm still waiting.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're sometime within the next few thousand years, it's going to show up. Yeah. But sometime within the next couple centuries to millennia, we're supposed to be entering into the next cycle of Earth changes. So whether that's within any of our future 2 or 3 or 4 incarnations, it's coming sometime soon. Again, like I was saying earlier, these changes don't show up overnight like that. Some of them do, but they take a little while to go into effect. So.
Yep, I'm down with all that. And again, I think it's a great time to be an observer. I think actually there's an element of transitioning carefully through these shifts simply by the mere act of observation and recognition. It will be it's almost like you're not a psychic deer caught in the headlights. If you're a completely normie or an NPC and you're wired into the system completely, you are the deer caught in the psychic headlights. But people like us can actually give ourselves, I really do believe there's a tremendous advantage just by the concept of observation and recognition and sharing on social media and so on, or with your friends in real life, these things you're noticing, because we all have a collective stake in sort of a tribal awareness on this thing.
Yep, to all of that. Okay, I'm in big trouble with this next one. The mind shifts in mysterious ways after midnight. Why it's never a good idea to be awake in the middle of the night. When I was a teenager, my parents' favorite response to my request to stay out late was always the same thing. Nothing good ever happens after midnight. Like most teenagers, I had perfected the art of an eye roll. What did I know? Well, apparently quite a lot, according to a new study published in the journal Frontiers in Network Physiology. The Mind After Midnight, Nocturnal Wakefulness, Behavioral Dysregulation, and Psychopathology. The concern that bad things happen after dark now has science behind it. When we are awake during the wee hours, neurophysiological changes in the brain alter the way we interact with the world, especially actions related to impulse control, reward processing, and high-risk decisions. If you've ever stayed up late and sent a regrettable tweet, wolfed down a box of cookies, polished off another bottle of wine, or gone on a late-night QVC shopping spree, you might agree that the mind after midnight is not thinking straight. If you're awake in the middle of the night, it's fair to say that your brain is not functioning at its best. Bad things happen after dark. Homicides and violent crime are more common at night. People are more at risk for engaging in harmful behavior such as suicide, violent crimes, and substance abuse at night. Our nighttime food choices at night also tend to be unhealthy, as we pursue more carbohydrates, lipids, and processed foods, and often consume more calories than we need. So why does behavior shift at night? The cloak of darkness offers a partial explanation. It's easier to commit crimes or indulge in unhealthy habits when fewer people are around and awake to notice or intervene. But there's more to it than that. Research shows how the mind shifts in mysterious ways after midnight. Number 1, the tendency to experience positive effect. Positive emotional states such as joy, energy, and cheerfulness are highest during morning hours and bottoms out between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. The tendency to experience negative effects. Negative emotional states such as anger, distress, and fear peaks at night when positive effect is at rock bottom. Number 3, the combination of low positive effect with high negative effect shapes how we attend to and interpret information. In the wee hours, things that are annoying or irritating can feel catastrophic. An ex's social media post about their new partner might have rankled you at 1 p.m. At 1 a.m., it's far more upsetting. Number 4, it's harder to manage a bad mood in the middle of the night. According to the study published in Frontiers in Network Physiology, we are more vulnerable to depressive, anxious, and paranoid thinking after midnight. Number 5, reward processing is out of whack and executive functioning is dysfunctional at night. Long-term planning and behavioral inhibition are diminished in favor of high-risk decision-making and cognitive inflexibility, leading to repeated maladaptive behaviors that do not respond to negative feedback, explain the researchers. If you are sending a kid off to college for the first time or back to school, have a conversation with them about prioritizing sleep. Remind them that in addition to improving academic performance, getting enough rest will protect their mental health. A study found that teens who got 8.75 to 9 hours of sleep per night had the lowest levels of mental health issues, including moodiness, feelings of worthlessness, anxiety, and depression. Fuck, I need to go to bed early.
I've always thought that the Thoth Three of Swords. I don't know if you can see it. Oh, you bastard. Okay, whatever. The Crawley Three of Swords Thoth card. We can stick it up later. Looks like a clock hitting midnight, and it's the darkness between midnight and 3 a.m. I've often thought that everything in that thing is true. In that article is true. We've all known it. The reason I've always thought that that was the case was because as we move to the other side of the earth, as it rotates, we're furthest away from the sun. And therefore, the effect of the sun upon us is at its least at like 3:30 a.m. And past, so we're kind of in a zone that we're kind of like away from the whatever the sun gives us in order to make us feel good and happy in the morning. But it is quite remarkable how your brain can run away with itself after midnight. I've often found that astounding. Like, I would have the most like bizarre thoughts, and like by 7 a.m. was like, what the hell was I thinking that about? Where did that come from? So, and also like fears are majorly compounded as well. So I think a lot of it has to do with the sun, but also, it's also the eating thing is interesting as well. That's almost like a panic measure, and more than a comfort. Am I going to survive it? Like they don't call the dark night of the soul for nothing. I think every night would be a dark night of the soul if you didn't sleep. And it's been well known that you go psychotic anyway if you don't sleep enough. So, but then again, I love staying up late. So if I'm doing something, I love staying up late doing it. That seems to be the key, doesn't it? But if you're lying in bed and not doing anything and you're just letting your mind running away with itself, that's when the demons come. But if you're up till 2 or 3 in the morning doing shit, productive stuff especially, they don't come. So it really is, I think it's really about what you're doing after midnight.
I would agree with that 100%. There are some really creative things that can happen in those points where you might be more vulnerable. I've composed some very interesting music that time of night, and we have our jam sessions down here in the basement. Frequently stay up all night and just until the sun comes up. And when we're doing something creative like that, it's amazing. And there's no darkness there as long as there's something to focus that energy into. But yeah, laying around in bed or sitting in front of the TV with just your thoughts, that can get destructive, especially the sitting in front of the TV thing. I've been there before where or in front of the phone or something, eating a whole box of cookies or whatever it is, and but if there's something, an outlet, whether it's work or creative work that is, or you're doing something to channel that energy. So it may be coming from those energies and those thoughts may be coming from dark places, but they get transmuted into something, whether you're sitting behind the drums or in front of a vocal mic or something, like it gets changed. It goes from one form of one state of being into another state of being, if that makes any sense. Like I've heard people talk before about the music they compose at 3 a.m. sounding different than the music they compose at 3 p.m. It's just, what's going to come out of you as a composer, as a songwriter at that hour is just going to be informed differently than your consciousness during the day, during waking hours. And I know for me personally that, yeah, I know what comes up. I know my darknesses. I know that I handle stress and sadness and change very poorly after the sun's gone down. Just doesn't matter if it's midnight, 3 a.m. or 10 p.m. or 9 p.m., whatever. If the sun has gone down and I'm in my groove, it's like I don't deal with change as well. I like kind of it's I guess it's that thing you were talking about, Thomas, about surviving the night. It's kind of like once the sun has gone down, I'm hunkered into whatever that is right then. I'm less adaptable, so to speak, I think, until I'm not. But yeah.
Timony, tell us about what you said. This story cut close to home. Tell us about it. We need your wisdom.
I've always been a natural night owl. It's my circadian rhythm. I tend to feel much more comfortable. I'm much more at peace at night. I'm much more creative at night. And I feel the same way with seasons too. Like I actually tend to get, if I'm going to get a seasonal depression or if I'm going to have, a thing I need to go through for the year, I'm going to get that in the spring and the summertime. That's like kind of my low point of the year. I start to really feel awake and energized during the darker months, from fall going into winter. And that's kind of that's my best time of the year. I feel most alive. That's when I want to be the most social and the most creative. So I don't know, but I mean, at the same time, there's definitely been times where I couldn't sleep for one reason or another, and thoughts creep in, and it ends up not being a great time. But I've just, since I was a very little kid, I've always had more of a tendency to stay awake at night, and I feel comforted by that. I don't know really what that is. I don't think that it necessarily has to do with the fact that there's not a lot of people around. Maybe it does have to do with the fact that there's just not a lot of people around, and I'm just in more of my own space and have to deal less with society and input and things like that. It's quieter for me, and I can get in touch with myself better. But yeah, I've always had that more natural inclination to stay up late. And then the morning times are a little the morning times are not my favorite. I tend to get, if I'm going to have anxiety in the day for no apparent reason, it's going to be in the morning time, and it passes as the day goes on. And as the sun starts to set, I feel much more relaxed. So I don't know if that's a circadian rhythm thing or really what that's about, but that's just been my experience with all that.
Interesting topic. I think it hasn't been properly studied. I think there's a lot more to this than just some people, the mind runs away with them at 3 a.m. I think there's profoundly spiritual things as well going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just thought of something profound with this, what Timothy was talking about. There are certain, so from the point of view that this article was written from, that it's a negative thing to stay up late past midnight and all that, and having your thoughts come up. I would say that might apply to people who don't have their shit together as well as, say, somebody like Timothy does. Timothy has her shit together really well, so she can go into those dark hours and be there 100% content with herself, where a lot of people, if they have to face themselves, like if they're the type of person that always has to be talking to fill in the quote unquote awkward silence, they can't just sit there in quietness. So for someone like that, being awake really late is going to be terrible for them because they've never once actually truly confronted themselves. But for the type of person who is naturally in tune with their own psychic space and goes there comfortably and can look at everything in that psychic space without running, being up late at night is probably, if you can afford it with your work schedule and everything, is probably a really great thing to be able to do, because as Timothy was saying, there's less people around, it's quieter, there's that stillness that I do really love that stillness between like 1 a.m. and sunrise. There's just an incredible stillness outside, unless you're next to the window where there's the drums and everything going on here, but there's a stillness except for our music late at night. But no, I do love that stillness, and going outside and just going for a drive late at night when there's less cars on the road, going for a walk late at night when there's no people out. There's something beautiful about that, where it's like if you try to go out in the morning and go for like a walk or a hike or a drive, there's just so many fucking people around and it can be really irritating. So I think there's something to that. If you are one that is naturally not comfortable with dealing with your own darkness, staying up late, it's probably not a good thing for you, because you're going to see those things that you have to confront. But for people who are very comfortable within their own shadow and can go into their own mind without getting lost, it's fine. So I think that has a lot to do with it. The point of view that this article was written from was kind of putting it as a negative thing to stay up that late. But again, just like many other things we've talked about on today's episode, if there's stuff for the masses, and then there's stuff for the initiate, and there's stuff for the adept, and there's stuff for the master. And the master is going to do things differently than the adept, differently than the initiate, differently than the person on the street. And the average person off the street, who's not a magician, who's not someone who shapes their own destiny, yeah, they're probably going to struggle a little bit more with staying up after midnight and their own thoughts and stuff. They might not be as in, what's that? Lunacy, right? They might not be in tune with their own stuff. So they might be that internal dialogue is what I was thinking of. Talk about the internal, not dialogue, internal monologue, excuse me. Depends on the person. Right. Internal monologue. Thank you. Unless there's a couple people in that person, then it is a dialogue. Wow. But yeah, the internal monologue, if someone's not used to their own internal monologue or dialogue, they might struggle with the characters in their mind talking to each other.
I have an internal monologue, dialogue, prologue, and epilogue.
Yep. Epilogue, yeah. Whole logging truck in there, yeah. Log drills and everything. But no, someone who's not used to the theater of their mind, if that theater of their mind switches on and all the characters put on their masks and start masquerading around, that's going to be like a bad trip to someone. But if someone's used to being in their own monologue, dialogue, Greek drama within their mind, late night isn't going to be that big of a deal to them. So I'm curious to see what will happen with the comments with this one. How many of us here do well late at night, do well after midnight, as a creative person. Like, I know I've got friends who are weightlifters and stuff, and they like going to the late night gym, where if they have a gym that's open 24 hours, they prefer to go in, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. when there's no one there, and they get their gym on really late at night, and they love that. For me, back when I was going to college the first time as a music major, I loved going to the practice rooms late at night. That was my favorite time to practice, was late at night. Same thing here. We're talking about, jamming downstairs. I love that, after midnight, everything is quiet except for us, but it's going to be different for the person off the street, to the initiate, to the adept, to the master. And the more one is a master of their own self, the more one knows themselves, I would imagine the less discomfort those things are going to be. And maybe the easier it is to tap into those things for some form of transmutation.
Yep. That's really all I have to say about that.
Yep.
Yep. All right. Here we go. Captured alien communicates with a KGB agent by telepathy, and it's asking for help. The footage was recorded by a former KGB agent. The agent was asked to record an investigation, and this is what he got. He went to a secret underground base, and once he managed to get inside, he noticed many locked doors. According to him, there were many strange sounds of some unrecognizable creatures. So he eventually entered the room where the extraterrestrials was kept. The people around him provided him with protective suits and assured him that there was no danger at all. When he reached the alien, he could hear the voice of the alien in his head, asking him to contact his superior and take him, the alien, out of the prison in which it was kept. The captured alien was scared and probably it was hurt by the base's personnel. Remember the alien interview from the Blue Book Project. Imagine what he felt being captured on another planet. These beings could be just us from the future, and we should treat them decent, considering that when we reverse engineered their technology. Wow, I read that sentence all wrong. These beings could be just us from the future, and we should treat them decent, considering that we reverse engineered their technology. Sorry about that. Anyways, Thomas, that one was for you. we know.
It's a good thing the Russians captured them and not the Chinese. They eat the fucker. But
yeah, put him in a walk.
yeah. But anyway, I don't know what to make of those kind of stories. Maybe they're true. Maybe there's some truth to them. Maybe they're not true. I don't know. I just find it interesting that like the fucker has a spaceship. It can come all the way from another world and then
get stuck
and ends up in a prison with some Russian guy. I just find that ridiculous. It's like, come on, you could do better than that. I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
They're for fun. They're for fun. We have to have a little bit of fun here. We go into some
true on some level. I mean, maybe there was some. I remember like back in the 90s, there was loads of great stories in like Art Bell that they were demons and stuff like that would have been actually captured through an interdimensional program. I found that stuff much more interesting, but I don't know. I mean, it's when I was a little kid, I used to think aliens just from the future, but then I think like that you don't mess with historical timelines. I think like there's a very interesting theory in physics that the past doesn't even exist. It's a new kind of thing of theoretical physics that like once the past is gone, it's gone. It's like it actually dissipates into like a kind of a quantum miasma, and there's no possible way of getting back to it. So maybe it's something like that. I don't know. The picture makes me laugh though. It's like they don't even get proper one. I don't know. You guys put that one up, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's some truth to it. Maybe there's some propaganda to it. But it's like I said, it's like every cliche in the book with these stories. You ever notice that? There's nothing original.
Nah, it's somewhere in the middle. It's probably a little bit of all of that and nothing at all. Yeah. So we have to bring aliens up because we're Americans, and that's the shit that gets our goat. So we have to go there.
Well, did you hear the story this week that Nick, that guy Nick Pope? He's like the big MUFON guy in England, and he's a former MI5 member, and he appears on just about every alien TV show and program on both sides of the Atlantic. Has come up, this shows you it's definitely a military thing, a really clear photo of a UFO, not a fuzzy one. So the first thing I thought of, well, that's a new kind of military weapon, and his job out there is to actually ease these things in, because if he was in MI5, he signed a binding agreement for life. He goes to jail if he spoofs on anything. But I think, my belief on UFOs, you can't photograph them because they're not actually there. They're just disturbances in the field. I mean, they're there, but they're not solid machines. And that's why when you zoom in on cameras, it's like a rainbow. When you try to get the start of the rainbow, it just disappears. They're the same thing. And maybe the aliens are similar as well, that you cannot actually reach them, communicate with them, that kind of thing. They're only observable from a kind of a safe distance or a specific distance. So this whole thing of like they had a discussion with an alien through telepathy, it seems a little bit too, what's the word, Doctor Who or something,
It's kind of like our last story where we were talking about people having their internal monologue or internal dialogue. This guy's having an internal conversation with aliens. Going back to the thing, though, about them being us from the future, what I do think about that could be a thread of the truth, not us as in beings, but us as in the body of the physiology. Like whenever I look at those, if people call them grays, if we just want to call them that, they kind of look like a fetus, or like what would happen if you were to clone a human body and then clone that clone and then clone that clone and then clone that clone and clone that clone. And you keep going, just like taking a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy, it begins to degrade and lose some of its fidelity. I would imagine with cloning, if you were to clone a series of beings like that, a series of biological entities, that they'd start looking like gray aliens. If you were to start making human clones, they would eventually stop losing any sense of individuality, and facial features would start to just degrade, and they would start looking like gray aliens. So I do wonder if the gray alien type thing, if that does exist out there, and you know, that perhaps that's some sort of biological machinery that has been cloned and cloned and cloned and used by a group of people out there for basic, you know, operational stuff, that maybe they're more like puppets. They're truly NPCs. They're truly soulless vessels. That if there is something like that, that if there's something like that has ever been recovered, it's more of a biological machine.
And you also remind me of something else. You know that you know this whole joke that it was only rednecks who get abducted by aliens in America. You know, that I think there's probably some truth to that. Those people are probably more closer to their folk spirit. And it's the same reason that Native Americans experience alien stuff more, and other indigenous people. If you think about it, who would be the indigenous white people of America? Well, the people from like the Appalachians and stuff like that. So it's not that unsurprising that they would have, you know, I know it's always made a joke of it, like, you know, that Jeff Foxworthy thing, you know, if you've had more members of your family abducted by aliens than have been to college, you're probably a redneck. But it's probably that's probably all about. You know, that those people go right back to the old country, and they've lived in the Appalachians or the bayous or whatever, and they've got generations of the same sort of folk spirit inside them. And they probably interpret it as aliens, but they probably have these mystical experiences just like the Native Americans.
Yeah, and I mean, even in present time, I mean, there are plenty of kind of, if you want to call them rednecks, whatever, you know, trailer trash, whatever you want to call them, the people that have been in what's that?
Barry Drewmore
types. Yeah, and they're not necessarily they don't necessarily have roots back to the old country, but they've been here in the US for so many generations, but they do have a deep connection to wherever it is, whether it's out here in the Tri-Cities in Washington, over in Benton City, you know, generations of people who've lived in the same trailer park. And those people, there is a sophistication about them in a spiritual way. I love doing deliveries to those people more than I like doing the deliveries to middle class, upper middle class, high class people out here. I find so much more reward bringing them, you know, a delivered thing of food, because it's a real treat to them, and they usually tip very nicely, and they're just so pleased to see me at their door with food. I drive Uber Eats as my matrix job, and I love going out to Benton City and into the trailer parks and everything, because those people, there's something in their eyes when you communicate with them. They're real human beings. And you know, the more you get to, like, when I worked over in Seattle, and I would do deliveries to like the biotech companies and stuff, and these people would show up, you know, at the door, and I'd deliver to them. They were just dead inside, and there's nothing there. So anyway, but this kind of folk spirit that exists within poor people, within the trailer parks, the hicks, the rednecks, the people who are slumming it. Yeah, there's some deep spiritual connection to the land, something. But yeah, those are the people that do have their UFO stories and their interdimensional stories, and have seen things. And I prefer their company usually over the company of many other people. It's I definitely prefer living over on this side of the
far-sighted vision, as they used to call it in the old days.
Yeah,
the far-sighted vision. You know,
people
and see beyond the material world.
Yeah, and it's whether or not they've got a connection to their genealogical heritage, or they've just got a connection to the trailer park that their great grandpa, their grandpa, their dad, and they've lived in, and their kid and their grandkid live in. It's just, there's something about that. They've set their roots down there, and their way of living works for them, and they, I don't know how to explain it other than that. It's something you have to
I
be
know
able
what
to
you mean.
see.
They
Yeah.
got into their groove in their local environment.
Yeah,
And
they've yeah.
I totally get that. And I believe you can do that in a city as well.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
if you're in the right kind of city and the right kind of scene, I think you could definitely do that. I
Right.
mean, if you look, I was reading those Isaac Bashevis Singer novels. They're all about like Jewish communities in Poland or in America, but they all have that same kind of folk spirit vibe that are very deeply rooted in mysticism, even though they're in an urban environment.
Right. Yeah, I like that idea too. It's like with paganism, with any of that, like you don't have to go out and live in the woods and live a rural pagan life. You can live in the middle of Manhattan. You can have all that. You can have your own, Thomas, you've talked about getting on the subways before and just going out there. I love stuff like that. Were you talking about that? Where you just get on a subway in the middle of the night and just go in New York? Was that? Yeah. Just things like that. Like
all over Brooklyn and the Bronx, and I used to do it all night long, and it's perfectly safe. I mean, people say not dangerous at all, but I go like way into the arse end of Brooklyn at like 3, 4 in the morning, or up into the north, into the Bronx, and you'd have all these kind of characters come through that would be very kind of, like something from a movie, or very mystical experiences. I mean, that to me was a very deep. I can always remember the last station on the Lower East Side in Chinatown, before on the F train, before you went into Brooklyn. It would go under the Reefs River. It used to actually feel like going through a port into another reality. And as soon as you arrived in Brooklyn, you felt like it was somewhere else completely different. It's a whole other reality.
Wow. Yeah, see, I love stuff like that. So it's like we don't need to go out and move out into the woods in order to have this kind of experience. You can do it anywhere. You can do it here in the Tri-Cities in Washington. You can do it anywhere. You can do it in San Francisco, New York, wherever you live in the United States or anywhere, to have a deep connection with the land that you live on. It doesn't have to be an agrarian, traditional pagan kind of thing. That's so anyway, I love that kind of stuff. You can do it anywhere you go. But yeah, going back to the aliens thing, this one was kind of interesting, and it does make me think that whenever I look at these gray alien type of things, that they are kind of like a clone of 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 a clone, which is very different than like we're just talking about the rural people who live in rural Washington or rural wherever, where they've got their roots set down into Appalachia or wherever. But when you take something that's been copied and copied and copied and copied and degraded, that might be what we're dealing with some of this alien stuff. That if there's obviously an interdimensional aspect, but like I've said so many times, I think that there's so much variety out there in the universe. It's not just one group of aliens or one group of jinns or extraterrestrials or extra dimensionals. I think there's a lot going on out there. I think there's a tremendous amount of variety in the universe, and it's good that we're starting to see that there aren't just humans and gray aliens or humans and whatever. That there's a lot out there. There's a lot of phenomena, and it's not all just nuts and bolts spaceships. It's not all just anything like that. There's a lot to it, and I think I hope that there are more stories that come out, but it's probably going to be difficult to find them because all the stuff that's going on right now is probably classified. And like you're talking about, Thomas, anybody who actually knows anything, they're bound to it. They're bound by oath to not disclose anything. So
I felt during the Rona days, especially in 2020, I felt a very strong alien presence and all that stuff, and I still do. It's gone now, but it was there. It was there at the time. And I can definitely very clearly remember that, the Lovecraftian archetypes were the only thing getting me through trying to understand what was going on. Like, is this actual thing the alien invasion? And I think in many ways it was. And I think like the ones who were taken over by it was like a invasion of body snatchers thing. The thing is gone now. It's definitely was left tremendous, aftermath. But I felt the Rona. When I talk about the Rona experience, I mean that springtime, April 2020 to about 5 months ago, I felt a very strong, unhuman presence contained within that got the leadership structure or something. And I still feel that. And that's why I think I was fascinated by the octopuses and stuff like that. And are they involved somehow, or is there? I still believe to this day that's, and I'll always believe for the rest of my life, that the whole Rona thing was an alien experience, an alien force. Now, I don't mean from another planet. I mean an alien pathological force fed off the human race. It's now had its fill and it's gone.
Yep, I felt that same kind of alien thing too from that time period up until 5-6 months ago. And
Yeah.
my final project for when I was going to Berklee School of Music online, I finished up then in December of 2020, and my final project was a video game that I was designing where I scored, and I just did very, very, very basic stuff within Unity but it was an alien invasion game. That's what I wanted to make my final project, was scoring the music for an alien invasion game. So I put this together, but it's just, that was so on my mind that year, the idea of being invaded, but not invaded like with, flying saucers coming through and like Independence Day movie style, but something more interdimensional and something more Invasion of the Body Snatchers type of thing. And that's kind of what I based my mock-up of a game that I made in Unity on. So it's just that was so on my mind that year. And it's been on my mind a lot since then. But it's like you said, Thomas, it's like it did its feeding, it did its harvesting, and it got all that it needed or wanted at that time period. And we're going into something different now. And I can tell things have really shifted here in the last, I would say, month or so, since kind of summer of 2022 has rolled on. That's just, things are shifting. And maybe, yeah, I'm not going to even go there, but yeah, that's things are absolutely shifting.
Yeah. It's funny. Back in 2012, I wrote a book called Defeat the Demons. The subtitle of that book was Consciousness Parasites in Psychopathic Society. And that literally turned out to be true in the end, that we had a conscious parasite that created a psychopathic society that had people sticking shit up their noses in order to collect the DNA.
Right.
But it's gone now. I really do feel it's gone now. We're left with the aftermath, but it's definitely, I don't feel it around anymore.
Right. And the aftermath is something we're going to have to contend with for a while. But like I said earlier, it's like there's always going to be things to contend with. It's that Abrahamic mindset of the end of war or the end of suffering or the end of anything. No, there'll never be an end of conflict. It's not like we're going into, the dawning of the age of Aquarius right now or something, but it's like we're obviously not the worst. There can always be economic stuff, and we're starting to see the economic consequences to everything. And the comments on the video where I said the thing about it being over, people were kind of tearing me up by saying, "Oh, well, there's worse to come." I'm like, yeah, I know there's worse to come. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
They're
also,
all,
you brought a full circle when you said the age of Aquarius, because in the show earlier on, we were talking about astrology, and I said that the whole thing, astrology has great Abrahamic influences. And here you are talking about the age of Aquarius. Well, what's that? The rapture.
Yeah. I was talking about the hair song.
But I know, but the term "the age of Aquarius." Is this belief in like a world paradise is coming?
Yeah, I was using it facetiously.
Heaven on earth,
right. Right. Yeah.
So you can see the Abrahamic influence in popular astrology just with that.
Right. That's what I was getting at. Like that song. This is the dawning of the. That one.
It's an bloody awful song.
Yeah. But that whole thing, it's just like thinking of the idea that like we're going to go into peace, love, and harmony, and that everything's going to be all good, or that everything is going to go into, rapturous end times. That like there's only one or the other. It's like, no, there will always be struggle and there will always be beauty. There will always be beauty in the struggle, and there will always be struggle in the beauty. It's just the way life works. And I'm not worried about it. Obviously, there are things I'm concerned about, but I think in the end, it's a very interesting, good time to be alive. Things are shifting, and it's a very fun time to be incarnate right now.
There used to be this brilliant comedian, philosopher, genius, madman called Spike Milligan. He was very close to Peter Sellers, and he never really got famous outside the UK and Ireland, but he was one of the greatest minds, bless you, Timothy, one of the greatest minds ever in terms of satire and stuff. And he had a show called, I think it was called Q, in the 1970s, and they often didn't know how to finish a sketch. So they would finish the sketch by going, "What are we going to do next? What are we going to do next?" And then vanish off the screen. And I often thought that was a perfect metaphor for how life is. There's never any conclusions. There's just the next thing.
I think that's the perfect way to leave studio episode 54. We made it 4 minutes past the 2-hour mark. So this was a great show. You guys, as always, have excellent points to make. Comment section was amazing. Thank you guys so much. We are within the 3 week countdown of coming on over there to your side of the world there, and we're very much looking forward to that. It really means a lot to me, everybody that can make the trip, that is making it, and I totally understand traveling is not an option for everybody at any given time. So no worries if you can't make it. Just please try and join in when we broadcast the premiere of the Atlantis film live. That would mean a lot of us. Everybody here has put in a tremendous amount of work on that one, and yeah, I think that's it. So anything else you would like to say, Thomas?
Ave Lucifer, long live the horn gods.
And what are we gonna do next?